The actress Michelle Pfeiffer said, "Like all parents, my husband and I just do the best we can and hold our breath and hope that we set aside enough money to pay for our kids' therapy." Welcome to the Mummafesto, the podcast where parenting and politics combine. I'm Stella Creasy. I'm one of the candidates in the general election in Walthamstow, North East London, and a mum of 2 young kids. My guest this week is Vicki Broadbent, aka Honest Mum. Vicki is a writer, director and author of the UK's #1 parenting blog. Her blog discusses everything from family life, food, fashion, travel to her experience as a parent, and it reaches over 8 million parents a month in this country. In 2018, Vicki published her first best-selling book, Mum Boss, a manifesto for surviving at work and home. Vicki, welcome to the Mummafesto. Vicki, thank you so much for joining us this week on the Mummafesto. Many people will know you because you set up the Honest Mum website, which is a mine of helpful information, the sort of thing that I used to find myself doom scrolling late at night in desperation. Tell us a bit about why you decided to set that up.
So it was a bit of an accidental kind of career, hobby turned career. Back in 2010, I was actually a director. So I was a TV director, a filmmaker, and I had my first baby. I'd had a really traumatic birth with him. It was a bit of a shock. It's a shock anyway, going from 0 to 1. Like no children, spontaneity, just suddenly having a baby. But I was so naive, Stella. Like I actually thought that I was going to take a 3-month-old on set with me and be able to like work a 12-hour day. Like I was just, so green.
You're talking to the wrong person, Vicki, because I took one into the House of Parliament. I was like, well, I've got no option, so
that's amazing.
What's the problem?
But yeah, I literally thought that for my career, that'd be like a practical way of like raising him. So I really quickly had to like email production, was actually, yeah, you're gonna have to take me off those projects. I was really naive to think I could do that, but ultimately it was really interesting because 2010 there were lots of really successful American bloggers. A lot of them had come from a Mormon culture, which writing was like a big thing, so it was a natural progression for some of these women to write and put it online. But I wasn't strategic. I didn't think of it as a career because I very much planned when he was older to get back, like as in 6 months or 1 year to get back to directing. But I felt like I needed a creative space and I needed to talk about what I was going through. And one of my close friends, who's also a filmmaker, Amankai Tapia, I used to ring her and tell her about this brave new world I'd found myself in, looking after a baby. And I was really, really honest with her that a lot of the time, having a newborn, especially when you're the default parent, it's quite boring. You're left on your own. There's no like ritual anymore. And I'd gone from leading hundreds of people on set to suddenly just baby and I at home with
they're not very chatty, are they? That's what when I first thought. You're like no,
I thought it would entertain me. I'm like, where's the entertainment here? So it was so every time I would ring her, she would be like, Vicki, you've got to write about this stuff. And she was the one that suggested a blog. And then it became this accidental career with the explosion of kind of online ads and lots of brands realizing, hey, mums and dads, but mostly mums, are not really watching as much TV. They're not buying papers. They're nursing or they're looking after a baby with a phone in their hand. So how do we communicate with them? And I remember when I was first approached about doing like an ad, and I was like, what do you mean? Like I write about my kid having chicken pox. How is this going to work? And they were like, well, a bit like a magazine. And I had edited a film magazine for quite a few years. So I think all those skills really helped. But what I loved, and what lots of other women, there was like a real sort of this advent of female bloggers, and I was part of the first wave. We were a bit like, where's the catch? Right? Because it felt like we'd found this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It felt like we'd been told by every industry, and this was the leveler, right? Because it was like teachers, it was directors, it was women in entrepreneur. It was on in every sector in the city where we'd sort of felt somehow our careers were definitely going to be compromised in some way or another. That we were going to be more economically fragile than we were before kids, or like mentally, whatever it may be. We felt like there was some sort of lack there, right? So to then be able to advertise, but also write, continue doing our stuff. We weren't, we were not being we didn't have any gatekeepers, if that makes sense. So I went from working in industry where I would have to have pictures approved, screenplays approved. I had so many gatekeepers to then get to filming. And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, I can just write. No one's telling me you've got to re-edit that, you've got to do this. But not only that, work with brands in a way that was a really financially sort of, it became much more lucrative. But even at the beginning, it was like a well-paid career that was flexible, and we were all a bit like in shock. We were all like, so where's the catch? Where, you know, what's going on? So I think for many of us, particularly that first wave, we felt we were finally given some sort of equality really in working online.
I think you touch on something so incredibly powerful, which is, frankly, for our generation of women, the shock, as you say, no matter what your role is, that when you have children, suddenly you're written off, and it's either your career or your kid. And I think in any industry, all of us thought that wasn't going to be the way it was going to be, and it's a very big wake-up call, and that actually feels really disempowering. And you feel like you've lost your voice because suddenly people don't see you, they just see a problem. I experienced it too in politics. I frankly think I'm still experiencing it, where people have just written me off because I had kids. And you say it's a great leveler, because the research shows us that mums are discriminated against in the workplace, even when they go back to work, because people think you're less committed, they think you're going to be more difficult to deal with. And that shock of, hang on a minute, you stop seeing what I'm capable of and you just see me as a potential liability, runs through every conversation we've been having in this podcast series. Just tell us a bit about, as you say, when you first had a child, you were like, well, I can still make this work, surely I can. What was that like when you realised that you couldn't?
And I think what happens with this sort of, because it is a form of discrimination, right? That two things happen. You either give up entirely, right? Because you think this is a losing battle as a woman. And you either look for another job or you pivot, or there's so many women I know that change careers because they just felt, even though they, you know, worked so hard, they've got degrees, they built up experience, they just felt that it was a losing battle, right? Or I know other women who have just had to almost internalize that misogyny, right? That very inherent misogyny, and worked harder than ever and burnt themselves out and had to show, this is not going to change me. In fact, I'm going to do more, which, if this was men, I'm certain there would be so much more infrastructure in place to support that man to succeed and prosper. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that I've noticed, that those two almost veering off. And I think for me...
And I notice women who will almost get cross with you if you don't struggle, because they feel that they've played the game, they have struggled, they've given up that time to be with their children, they've given up that opportunity to be at the school play or to be at school gates, they have not been able to be the parent they want to be, and they feel that any challenge to that and saying, well, hang on a minute, why have we put you in that position in the first place, is challenging their choices, that they didn't pivot, as you say, they didn't go, okay, I'll give up, I'll go and do something part-time, I'll go and do something which isn't as senior as I have been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with that, whatever the outcome is, there is a loss of self and there's a loss of confidence, which takes quite a long time to heal from. And and I think that we get the short straw with both scenarios to some extent. But I also think it's important to add that that we're very privileged to even have a choice of, can we pivot? For many women, that's not a choice. They have to work 2 jobs or 3, or, you know, and sort of share childcare with friends, and everyone's struggling. And I've seen that as well. And I'm a former teacher, and I taught in socially deprived areas, and I've seen firsthand how hard that is. I was one of the lucky ones and could barely cope, you know. But I think what was interesting, I defined a lot of my identity with my career. Because as a filmmaker, you are struggling anywhere. There's only about, well, at the time, I don't know now the stats, but it's about 4% of female directors. So I knew off the bat that I didn't see that many, and it was something so ambitious. So, you know, there were a lot of women that were going into other parts of the industry. I was sort of determined, you know, I'm very creative. I'm a storyteller. But I was also told that I had something called polycystic ovaries, and that if I didn't have a baby before 30, I might not be able to have a baby. So for me, I was very, I sort of thought to myself, what would we say the pinnacle of of a successful directing career? Would it be to win a BAFTA? Would it be to win an Oscar? Would it be, but if I didn't have a child, because I've always been a really maternal person, would that be enough? And I felt no, it wouldn't. And I was lucky that I'd met my husband during my uni years, so we were both ready. And I was pregnant about 27. And I remember to this sort of TV and film industry, I had really, really supportive exec producers and things. But I remember being on set and the head of sound, I was pregnant. I was about 6 months pregnant. And it was quite a famous cast and stuff. And I remember in front of everybody, the sound guy said, because I just won an award from Channel 4 that was like Best New Filmmaker, years ago. And he was like, don't you think you're taking a massive risk being pregnant? In front of absolutely everybody, that I was obviously leading the crew. And I remember feeling like I actually had to go to the loo to cry because I felt so, it was almost like, what did he want me to say? Like, I'm pregnant. And, that was a choice that I made. And I did say something. I said, I'm sure I'll get back to things. And it's fun, I really wanted a baby. But the fact that he felt okay to sort of question me. And to be honest, I forgive him. And I'm sure it's just an example of a reflection of the culture that we're in, and he maybe was genuinely curious because he doesn't see a lot of women in their late 20s pregnant and directing. I don't know it, but it really stung.
But it's really not any of his business.
No.
The other point. But the very first person that we interviewed on this series was Biban Kidron, and Biban told 2 stories, both one in terms of Steven Spielberg offering to be guarantor that she could direct a film when she was pregnant so that they would go ahead and have her, and also being forced to go to a screening less than 24 hours after she'd given birth to see a director's cut, both of which are stories about our creative industries. You're obviously also somebody who worked within the creative industries, a massive, massive part of our economy in this country, and actually underrepresented in terms of women who are directors such as yourself. Just tell us a bit about your experience of that. As you say, that's a very good example of the kind of discrimination.
I'll tell you
what are you missing out on by not tackling these issues?
Well, absolutely. And by not, we as we are very powerful storytellers. And also I produced as well. So I looked after budgets. Straight out of getting a master's, I went to Goldsmiths University of London, brilliant university. Oscar winners have come out of there. There were what I loved about Goldsmiths, they challenge you so that you would really push creativity, but in a really supportive, emotionally healthy way. But and being somewhere where you'd see Damien Hirst still working there like years later, but he would do his work. It just felt like anything was possible. It was bubbling with like potential, and you felt that when you left, you would be able to do things. And I actually wrote and directed a short film called Riffs, which was about warring kebab shop owners in London, Greek and Turkish Cypriot, a really powerful film. It won a Peace Prize. It went all over the world. It went on telly. And it was amazing because I was able to bring the Greek and Turkish Cypriot community together, like in a cast, but also, the fact that it was shown at festivals in Turkey and in Cyprus. It was just such a powerful thing to be part of. And it was really ambitious for my master's. We created kebab shops on location and stuff. And straight out of that, I had big film companies like Working Title, who'd seen the short going, we love this. It feels like you've got something for a feature film, right? So I'm 21, got a distinction, my master's, but was completely like green really to the industry. Throughout uni, I'd worked in the industry, absolute various, from like horror stories to kind of, all sorts. But I'd really put myself out there because I thought I really want a job when I leave. I don't want to struggle. So I worked for the BBC, I worked for radio shows, I worked for also like throughout my degree and my master's. So when I left, I was really excited, and I started developing a feature film, and I worked as a runner for a really big company, distributors, and they also produced as well. And it was called Red Bus. It's now called Lionsgate UK, and they made Bend It Like Beckham there. So they were behind that film, and I remember thinking, you know, Gurinder Chadha was such a big inspiration to me anyway. And I remember thinking, gosh, there's some really powerful female directors out there that are doing stuff. This is possible for me. So I suppose to some extent, having my baby, I'd sort of felt for all these years, and I've been around really successful women as well, I did feel a sense of, gosh, I don't think this is going to be possible for me for various reasons. Or I felt like, oh, I will get back to it. And practically it's quite hard. And then the longer you're out of the industry, the harder it is to then return, I feel. I mean, I'd love to at some point. I've still got feature film ideas. I mean, Risk never got made as a feature film. It got optioned by BBC Comedy for telly. Then it moved because their head of drama moved, and it didn't get made. But there's all sorts of ideas I've got, and I wrote a screenplay. But actually, it's almost that thing of like, how realistic is me as a mum of three to be able to get commissioned, to have the time to push. I mean, most films take about 8 years development to get made. So maybe one day, but there is definitely, there's a lot of hurdles for someone to reach success within that industry, or within telly, or as an actor, or whatever it may be. It's songwriter. I think as parents, we do have it harder. And also creativity relies on having this kind of real strength. It's a bravery, right, to put your work out there. But what I have seen that's been brilliant is people like myself and people that are far more successful than I am in the parenting lane, who have built an audience from nothing, right? So like, I had a little video that reached 44 million people watched it, and I actually DM'd a friend of mine. He's a male filmmaker who's doing very well in America and stuff, and I was like, Simon, I never expected this was going to be the film that got me all these millions of views, because like, I thought it might be a movie in the cinema, or the next My Big Fat Greek Wedding or something. So there's different ways that we're storytelling. And throughout history, whatever adversity people found, whether it was financial or whatever, these stories found a way out. And I think for women right now, in this point of time, historically, we've done that. We've said, right, the industry doesn't want us, or we cannot work to their restrictions, right? I can't do a 13-hour day with a baby on set, because you are the mother to the actors. This is what people don't understand. You are the mother to the crew. And there's a really lovely, I don't know where it is now, but it was a making of another short film I directed called Broken, and it was a 35 mil. It was a really big shoot, and when Film London backed it, and there was a making of, and somebody, and this was before I'd had a baby or before I was pregnant, and someone said, describe Vicki as a director, and they said, she is a mother. And that just stuck with me, because you are. So how can I mother everybody else, my script, with people that I need to keep alive? It's not easy. It's possible, but it's not easy, and not when they're young, I don't think. But I've not lost hope. Maybe one day something.
I had the naivety of thinking, what I'll do is I'll just put one of those rubber rings in my office, and then the baby's just like, I've seen the pictures. Babies sit in these things for hours, don't they? Just gurgling and entertaining themselves. I can get on. I can help write laws. Of course, the baby's out of it within 5 minutes, crawling around the office, finding everything sharp. And then, of course, vomiting on the furniture. So you're like, I'm so sorry. If the minister could just sit here, the reality
is so true. But why did we think that? Why were we told those myths, right? Because there's not enough women writing the scripts. And now we've got amazing stuff over the last sort of decade, where you've got Motherland, and you've got like, you know, I watched something on BBC called Peacock. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a new series, and the ensemble cast, there's a new mother and father who've had twins. And honestly, listening to the way it's written and the way they're talking to the parents, it's so real, and it's so funny, and it's so honest in a way that I've not seen before. Like, do we ever see anyone breastfeeding in soap operas? I haven't. Do we ever hear about the real struggle? So and that matters, because the way that we consume media, and as women, the way that we consume stories, and often they say that women's habits are more into these longer ongoing kind of narratives. So the soaps, I'm not saying I'm not really that interested in soaps, but I'm saying, or like the series that you keep coming back to, these we don't really get a lot of insight. And the other problem, I think, is the curriculum and what children are learning. So something my 14-year-old said the other day was, we were talking about the fact Ginny's got a brother and a sister, and he said, I think every every boy should have a sister, because what you learn about girls is so important. And I think that is important. Not everyone's going to have a daughter, right, and a son, but why are we not knowing more about, you know, when we're puberty's covered, and why isn't perimenopause covered then as something that will happen at some point, and what that means? And I think there are a lot of gaps. And post-pandemic, and this new pandemic of the mental health crisis that children are suffering with, and adults, we're still in that, you know, that wave. I feel like there's a lot that isn't addressed sort of holistically, in a sense, or in a 360 approach in school.
So that's obviously where you've talked about your blog being a point where actually you could do it flexibly, and that fitted around being able to look after children, but it's also allowed you to cover topics and to talk about the stories and tell the stories that, as you say, lots of women and lots of mums and dads are having at home, often late at night, stressed out, reading things on their phone. And who do they talk to? Where do they find information? Just tell us a little bit about the reaction you've had to your blog.
Yeah, I think so when I started, I didn't really expect anything. I mean, you know, Facebook and Twitter were around. Instagram wasn't really around. I think, did that come out in 2012? But I remember thinking, you know, my mum's going to be the first person that reads it. My mum's a former lecturer and someone that I really valued her opinion on. So it's like, she'll read it, and then let's see who reads it. I'll send it out to some friends. And I'd created sort of a batch of blog posts.
Does your mum do what my mum does? My mum will listen to check that I'm not saying anything rude about her, which I never would, Mum. I promise you, I never would.
Yeah, no, she does. And she has to get the approval before I post. If she's in a video, she's like, show me first. Oh, no, I don't like that angle. Reshoot. So I'm dealing with divas, you know, really big divas here. But yeah, my dad was laughing because he keeps getting recognised in the supermarket from like being on my reels and my blog and stuff. No, but ultimately, I think what's been really nice recently is I've written posts about, I had my daughter at 40. I was 5 days before 41. I've written quite a lot of pieces that are coming up a lot in Google about, you know, being a mum of 3 over 40 and what's it like, sort of going from 2 to 3. And other women have found me through that and found that really useful. We know how divisive, you know, online can be, and particularly Instagram, TikTok, they favour really short content. You know, I've had meetings with Meta. They've told me 4 seconds, 5 seconds, that's what they want. And it's really hard to get a lot across in that time. So what I love about blogging, and why I still blog, is the fact you can be much more nuanced. You can be you know, more detailed about experiences. You've got more space to actually investigate things more. So and it's something that is really important. And I think quite a lot of people have dismissed blogging in a way, which is really interesting. So it was this huge thing. Lots of people rode that wave, and now they're not as bothered. They're more into video. And I think that's good. But there's such a huge place to that. And I'm still working with brands, but a lot of American and European brands really want blogs. So it's interesting I feel like, because when you're at the advent of something, you witness so many different changes. And now we've got threads, and now we've got AI. I mean, AI is a whole new thing where you've got AI creators, you've got AI search. So things are rapidly evolving all the time, and the way that we're communicating is. But I think at the heart of it, people want emotion on screen. And that was something that I gave a little talk at the Berlin Festival, the Berlinale Film Festival, and the year before I was actually part of they do this thing called the Talent Campus. I remember going back the following year, and one of the speakers had said, that is all that matters here. It was like a filmmaker or screenwriter, just get emotion on screen. And I think that's really stayed with me, because that's universal. And I think that's the power of blogging as well, that people can look at me or look at whoever they follow and go, oh yeah, I get that. You know, I'll make a silly video about PMT, but it's actually really important, like, as well, you know. So it's great that we've got these strong female voices, and it's great that women are sort of dominating some of these areas creatively, like Threads. I don't know, I read somewhere it's majority women, and there was this big trending thing of like hashtag women supporting women, and there were sort of grumpy men coming on. But you know, I take this egalitarian approach of, it's really important. And one of the things I put on Threads was, finally, we're going to talk about issues that women, without being shut down, because there's a lot of, it can be scary out there, right? You know that firsthand. And there are times when I've written something and then I'm like, oh, delete, you know, for fear of that. So I think I've definitely become more resilient as a storyteller and through what I'm doing now.
And so I guess there'd be two questions in my head. I mean, one, someone listening to this, facing that moment, that crisis of confidence that I think comes when you do have a child and suddenly lots of things are upended for you. People's questioning about who you are, what you're capable of, whether you're committed anymore. What would you say to them about being able to tell stories? I mean, you're saying that there's these spaces now actually where we can have these conversations. What would you say to them about them? And then I guess my second question is, obviously this is called the Mummafesto. This is about where parenting and politics combine. These are conversations, as you say, people are having every single day. I know I mean, me and my friends WhatsApp each other ridiculous amounts, especially late at night, kind of agonies. What do you think that means for what we could be doing to support those women and to support those parents and to support women at that point when you become a parent? So what would you say to if someone's listening to this right now?
If someone's listening right now, I think
baby won't feed, you know, nothing's going right. They've had 2.5 hours sleep. They're looking at their tracksuit bottoms going, did these ever get washed ever? What would you say to them?
I mean, I would say that it's a time for self-compassion. I think that we have to forget about the noise, or we have to protect our inner peace as much as possible. If you do have support, reach out for that. Often people, I mean, when I think back to some of the times when I was struggling the most postnatally, after Florence, after traumatic birth again, after various things, I look very seemingly happy online. I even shared a reel recently of like, look, this is someone who's really high functioning kind of after trauma, smiling, laughing. So it's not always obvious. Sometimes you might get 5 minutes. That's kind of a good thing. And you're sharing something, and that you don't have to be a creator. You might have put some pictures on Facebook, right, to your friends, and people think, oh, she's doing really well. Kate's doing great as an imam. It's really hard. We have this pressure of appearances, right? And then it's also harder than ever in some cases, because I think women feel this pressure that if they're not loving every minute, enjoy every minute of this baby time, or if we admit that we're struggling in some way, it diminishes us as a parent. We start questioning, are we natural parents? Are we good enough? Are we up to this? Will we be judged? And there's this huge, and that can overwhelm like the ability to ask for help. When I was very unwell after Oliver and felt mentally rock bottom, I went to see my GP, and that was a time when it was quite easy to get referrals, right? We're like 2010 here, for mental health. It wasn't there weren't the same pressures, and it was a locum, to be fair, so we didn't know my history, but it's like, you look fine, you look great, you've got lipstick on, you look all right. You don't need a therapist, you just need a bit more sleep. And granted, I needed more sleep, but I definitely needed therapy. I had intrusive thoughts, I felt rock bottom, I was unwell. And I think we are fighting to be heard. We are fighting in this, you know, the patriarchy, right? To say, can you listen to me? I'm not well, I need help. So I think, but also understanding what you're up against allows you to go, right, I get this system, okay, but I'm still going to try and reach out to friends or family, or I'm going to work out ways to support myself, or I'm going to see if I can get a referral, or I'm going to, whatever it may be. I think, you know, for me, I've been really lucky that I've had quite a lot of therapy that's really, really helped me. I would love there to be greater investment, like everyone, into the NHS. Nobody in this country, whether they vote for, wants privatisation to happen. I think if we're looking at a Mummafesto, we need to really think about that. I am watching in horror at, you know, people that are thinking that having a heart attack sitting in a waiting room for 8 hours and there's no beds. And also lots of friends of mine that are doctors and consultants, and hearing from them what they're having to deal with. It is shocking. But I think we also need investment into education, and really, because with that's such a liberating ticket. When I listened to kind of my mum, who's the first in her family to go to university, and she got a master's and started a PhD when I came along, then quit it because I was a very demanding baby, but also because it was even worse then, right, in terms of
Well, you can't get childcare support as a student. There's loopholes in the system because, again, it hasn't occurred to people that women might want to continue training once they've had a baby. Like, because you've had a baby now, your life is over.
Yeah, and I really hope that there's a greater understanding of women and mums, and to see us as people who are still ambitious, that still have life in us. That if anything, we've multiplied all these skills. We've learned how to juggle so much, and inherently we have so much potential. And actually, you know, now post Brexit, and we're looking at the way that certain economies are really certain sectors of economy are really suffering, that women could really thrive in, but we've not been invested in. And I think we need, for me, those would be some areas that are really, really important. And even, I mean, if we look at how stretched the school system is and the NHS is, loads of parents that I know that would have wanted to train or retrain into nursing or even medical school. Now I know that they've shortened the years or gone into teaching. They're so worried because of the stories that they hear, the lived experience. I mean, when I was a teacher, I did feel like an untrained social worker as well, and it was really hard, and that was many years ago. So it is hard anyway. But now we've got things where teachers, you know, they don't have resources, they don't have stationery, and that's very off-putting. And we've had a teacher crisis for many years. When I was at uni, I remember being a researcher at The Guardian, and I was researching the teacher shortage crisis then. So I'd really like to see change, like many people, how realistic some of these things are. And I know it will take a lot of time, but I know that you're championing a lot of those things that are going to help parental rights. It's frightening. And also to think that as women, we care for our children mostly as a default parent, and then we care for elderly relatives. But where does that leave us economically? Where's the security? And actually, in order to be successful, you need to be able to take some risks along the way in your career. But we have to be fairly risk averse as mums, right? Because we can't just go, oh, we're going to try that job out and see if it works, or we're going to retrain. But what are we going to do? Because that's going to cost 10K to do that thing, or that, you know, or 6K for that master's, and then I need 3 more years to do. There's so many things that are they're against us. And I think with the university system as well, things need to change, because so many children with masses of potential are having to turn their backs on that education because of being lumbered with so much debt and the fragility of the economy, and not knowing if they're going to get jobs. And it's not the easiest time to be bringing up kids, is it, in this world, where it's hard to get a house, where it's hard to get mortgages, where it's, you know, all this stuff that we're all, you know, worried about generally. So I hope Labour get in. Can I say that? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that.
I'm never going to stop you, but I think it's really important, and what you are doing so powerfully is showing why it matters that we have the conversation, because your career and your ability to tell those stories and the way in which you've used your blog to do that opens up a space for other parents to come forward and recognise they're not alone. And the more we talk about this, the more I hope we're doing this podcast. I'm not as technically capable as you, but it's about trying to tell the stories that are happening in those everyday lives, that if we get public policy right, we can unlock all that talent. And I really do hope that you get your short film made into the full film.
Well, the big goal is a feature film now, a feature film or a TV series one day. I'm not gonna lose hope. And also, and things I've found in the creative industry, in the arts, they take longer, and for parents they take even longer. But you see male directors at 90 there with the cameras and directing. So
but that's the thing that makes me saddest of all, is we've seen it particularly with women going into public life. They have to wait. And you've got a brilliant idea, and all I make a plea for is perhaps, you know, an extras role, just a walk on.
Yeah.
Just come and get me my halloumi wrap. Maybe I could just come and get a halloumi wrap in the back of the film. That's all I'm asking.
We'll write you a part. No, I would love that, and I think for me that would be a dream come true one day. But I also understand this chapter of my life it's not as easy to fulfill every ambition. I have fulfilled some of the ambitions that are on there. I'm writing a children's book at the moment, out next year. There's various things that I am doing, But I do have to accept that right now I simply couldn't be on set all day long as much as I would, and I think I've got a lot to offer. But maybe one day soon. But thank you, Stella. It's been so lovely to
thank you for
talk to
telling your
you.
story in the Mummafesto. I do hope you've enjoyed listening to Vicki today on the Mummafesto. I'll always be frustrated when talented, creative women feel that they have to compromise because they've had children rather than being supported to be equally brilliant and talented in all the different fields of their lives. Please do check out Vicki's blog, The Honest Mum. We'll share the link with this video, and look out for me hopefully eating a halloumi kebab in the back of her next film. Please do listen to the next episode.